This is the grudge match. One fall, 30-minute time limit. In the ring at this time, from somewhere in the United States, 245 pounds, Wild Bill Irwin, sometimes known as Chauncey.
Barney William Irwin was born September 17, 1954, though he would come to be known simply as Bill. Bill was born in California, but his parents were originally from Duluth, Minnesota, and would relocate the family there when Bill was 3 years old. Bill and his older brother Scott had a typical upbringing, with both taking an interest in sports while at school. Bill lettered in multiple sports in high school, but it was hockey where he really stood out. In high school, Bill was known as the enforcer on the hockey team, fighting opponents and protecting teammates by targeting the key players on the other team. This type of player is generally referred to in hockey as a Goon. This led to a lot of game ejections for Irwin, but also helped form his fighting skills. Bill took those hockey skills to the College of St. Scholastica in Duluth and was part of their NAIA National Championship in 1975. After leaving college, Bill took his first step toward a pro wrestling career. The step was so unexpected, even Bill didn't know he was taking it. Scott Irwin had begun his pro wrestling career in 1976, and by 1977 was working opening and lower mid-card matches in the Carolina-based Mid-Atlantic territory. Scott invited his brother to come for a visit, and Bill agreed, wanting to get out and see some of the world outside Duluth, but with no intentions of starting a pro wrestling career himself. In the blink of an eye, that changed, and before Bill could even adjust to the Carolina weather, was training with his brother Scott and wrestler Larry Sharp, and working out with a rising star named Ric Flair. His first workout with Flair, which included doing 500 squats, ended with Bill throwing up in Flair's bathroom. Not long removed from being a Minnesota hockey player with a reputation for brawling, Bill Irwin was headed to the ring for his first match in Lynchburg, Virginia, on September 16, 1977, against Boris Malenko. Irwin later recalled, "I'd never been out there in front of people. Now I'm walking to the ring wearing nothing but a little pair of tights on and some boots. And this old man spins me around upside down, makes me look and feel stupid, but it was fun." For the record, Bill took the loss. Bill went through the typical duties of a rookie at the time, driving stars like Flair and Blackjack Mulligan to cards and learning the rules of kayfabe, but also quickly picked up his first victory. Irwin took the win over Ricky Ferrara on November 26, 1977, at Memorial Auditorium in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Irwin spent 1978 traveling to get more experience and work in front of different crowds. Runs in Georgia and Tri-State, where he jobbed the stars like Tommy Rich and Bobby Jaggers, but picked up occasional wins over other enhancement talent, led to a short but important run in Missouri. Not only did Irwin start finding himself on the winning side of the ring more often working in Central States Wrestling in St. Louis, but also held established veterans Siegfried Stanke and Bulldog Brown to time-limit draws. Bill also won the first championship of his career when he and Brian St. John defeated Jerry Brown and Hartford Love for the NWA Central States Tag Team Championship on May 17, 1979 in Wichita, Kansas, though they would have to vacate that title soon thereafter when St. John left the territory. Outside the ring, Bill struck up a friendship with Bruiser Brody during his time in Missouri, which would turn out to be important later in his career. Outside of the business, it was around this time Irwin met and married a Minnesota girl named Clarine, who is still his wife to this day. Irwin finished out 1979 in championship wrestling from Florida, where he reunited with brother Scott, who was working there as Thor the Viking. Bill teamed with brother Thor several times as he moved solidly into the mid-card, though still losing to the likes of Jack and Jerry Briscoe. Bill was not on top of the card, but was proving to be a solid hand in the mid-card 4 months into his time in Florida, making what came next a tougher decision than it might seem. Dory Funk Jr. approached Irwin and asked if he was interested in going on a 3-week tour of Japan. Just 2 years into business and finally feeling like he was getting a good footing in Florida, Irwin was worried about losing his spot if he were gone for 3 weeks. Funk assured him he would be able to come back, so, somewhat reluctantly, Irwin agreed to his first tour of Japan, starting in January 1980. Barely 25 years old at the time and having only traveled through a small portion of the United States, Irwin felt out of place just getting off the plane in a country on the other side of the planet. After making his way through customs and struggling to find the right place to be picked up, he was pleasantly surprised when he finally spotted Bruiser Brody, who was there for the same tour. With a familiar face helping him get his footing, Irwin relaxed. Brody told Irwin not to tell anybody they enjoyed the trip and to play it off like it sucked, reasoning if they found out how good it was, they would all want to come, and he might not get to come back. In the ring, Irwin went through the 3 weeks with 0 victories, but gained valuable experience facing Japanese stars like Genichiro Tenryu, Jumbo Tsuruta, and former NWA World Champion Giant Baba. He also faced off against another former NWA World Champion Terry Funk in at least one match as the Masked Asteroid, where he was unmasked at the end of the match. Japan offered a style that fit in with Irwin's hockey-playing past, as Japanese wrestlers worked far more stiff in the ring than most of their American counterparts. Despite the fear of losing his spot in Florida, Irwin did not immediately return there when he came back to the U.S. A month-long run in what was now Mid-South Wrestling was followed by a month-long run in Southeastern Championship Wrestling. By May 1980, Bill's brother Scott was now working as the Masked Super Destroyer in Florida, which inspired the idea of a tag team with Brother Bill. On May 6, 1980, Scott and Bill made their first appearance as the Super Destroyers. They lost that first match to Bugsy McGraw and Dusty Rhodes, but later faced Jack and Jerry Briscoe for the Florida Tag Team Championship. The Super Destroyers didn't win that title, but it planted the seed for what was to come in a few years. At the same time, Bill began appearing in the Memphis-based Continental Wrestling Association, simply as Bill Irwin, where he finally got a short push as a singles wrestler. Irwin made his first appearance in CWA with a time-limit draw against Carl Fergie at the Mid-South Coliseum on July 7, 1980. In his first couple of weeks in the territory, he picked up important wins over Fergie as well as a young Eddie Gilbert, and faced CWA champion Billy Robinson for the title in Evansville, Indiana. Irwin didn't win that belt, but in August, Irwin did pick up a championship and entered into his first real feud. In the finals of a tournament for the vacant AWA Southern Heavyweight Championship on August 11, 1980, Bill defeated Jimmy Valiant to take the first singles title of his career and began a feud with Valiant over that title. Both the title reign and the feud would be somewhat short-lived, with Irwin defending the title against Valiant in Louisville and Memphis over the next few days. The match in Memphis ended in a no contest when things got out of hand, and the title was held up. In a no disqualification rematch for the belt at Mid-South Coliseum on August 25, 1980, Valiant would defeat Irwin and take the championship. The feud lingered for another couple of weeks, capped by a no disqualification match in Louisville, with Valiant coming out the winner. Irwin continued to get title shots against Valiant into October as the primary focus for Bill and the CWA slowly shifted toward tag teams with a variety of partners. What seemed like a good pairing with Gypsy Joe brought a brief feud with Bill Dundee and Tojo Yamamoto through September 1980. That pairing gave way to a tag team with Larry Latham. Part of an early incarnation of Jimmy Hart's first family, Irwin and Latham worked well together, and on October 27, 1980, they defeated Tommy and Eddie Gilbert for the AWA Southern Tag Team Championship at Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis. Irwin and Latham turned out to be something of transitional champions, as they lost the belts a week later to Ken Lucas and Ricky Morton, but to be fair, that title changed hands fairly often. Finally, fresh off his tour of Japan, Bill's brother Scott left the Super Destroyer mask behind temporarily to appear in the CWA. Irwin's faced Ken Lucas and Ricky Morton for the Southern Tag titles on November 10, 1980, which ended in a double disqualification and the belts being held up. In a rematch a week later, Lucas and Morton defeated Bill and Scott to regain the title. By February 1981, Bill was on the move again, returning to Florida for a 3-month stretch before spending most of May in Georgia and another brief appearance with Scott as the Super Destroyers in Mid-Atlantic. In June 1981, Bill crossed the border into Canada for an active 3-month run in the famed Stampede Wrestling. Primarily wrestling in tag matches, Irwin was quickly in the mix for the Stampede International Tag Team Championship, getting 2 matches against champions Duke Myers and Kerry Brown with partner Bruce Hart, though they never took the title. Irwin mostly tagged with Randy Tyler while in Stampede, and the Irwin-Tyler matchup actually took several non-title victories over Myers and Brown, but when the title was on the line, the champions managed to leave with the belts. In August 1981, just before Irwin left the territory, he teamed with the young Jim Neidhart in the final attempt to take the tag title. Irwin and Neidhart faced Myers and Brown for the title in Calgary, Alberta and Regina, Saskatchewan, but fell short of taking the belts. After finishing up his commitments in Stampede in early September, Bill made his way to the territory where his pro wrestling persona really started to take shape. Bill went to the Dallas territory of the NWA, then known as Big Time Wrestling. Irwin made his Dallas debut on September 13, 1981 at the Sportatorium with a victory over Terry Orndorff. Bill took a few wins over enhancement talent and even held David Von Erich to a time-limit draw as he impressed the insiders in Dallas with his skill and ferocity. When asked about the newcomer, referee Bronco Lubitsch said, "He really gets wild in the ring." A simple statement that would immediately label Irwin with a nickname he carried the rest of his career and beyond, Wild Bill Irwin. Irwin's classic look started coming together as well, carrying a bullwhip to the ring along with his kerchief, cowboy hat, and duster coat. Irwin was given a prominent spot as part of H&H Limited, a stable headed up by Gary Hart and Armand Hussein. That immediately made him part of that stable's long-standing feud against the Von Erichs, which is exactly where a heel wrestler in Dallas wanted to be in the early 1980s. As part of that stable, Bill briefly became one half of the Dallas version of the NWA World Tag Team Champions with Frank Dusek. That title win likely happened in a phantom match against champions Kerry Von Erich and Terry Orndorff, as Orndorff had left the territory while still holding his belt. Irwin and Dusek dropped the belts to Kerry and Al Madrill on December 7, 1981. As 1982 rolled around, Bill was already a well-established part of the Dallas wrestling scene, not only battling the Von Erichs, but also facing off against a babyface spoiler who was feuding with his former manager Gary Hart. Irwin even challenged Kerry Von Erich for the American Heavyweight Championship in April, though Kerry came away with the win. Bill also took the Texas Heavyweight Championship from Al Madrill in another phantom match with no sure date. Basically, they were just looking for someone to keep it ready for David Von Erich, who was on his run in Florida at the time. Like a lot of things in Dallas at that time, it was a situation of being in the right place at the right time for Irwin. Bill went into June 1982 holding a prominent singles title and active in prominent feuds, just as the territory was preparing for its most historic transition. Irwin was part of the June 4, 1982 Wrestling Star Wars Super Bowl at Texas Stadium, commonly referred to as the Fritz Von Erich Retirement Show, the first major card held under the territory's new name, World Class Championship Wresting. Irwin appeared in the $10,000 Body Slam Battle Royal at the Texas Stadium show, which was not surprisingly won by Andre the Giant. More importantly, he had a singles match defending the Texas Championship against veteran Ken Mantell early on the card. Irwin vs. Mantell was Pro Wrestling 101 for the time, with the verbal Irwin laughing as he gained the upper hand on the babyface Mantell, then cowering as things didn't go his way. As the 13.5-minute match neared the end, it looked like Mantell would take the win when Irwin missed with a knee drop, and Mantell used the opportunity to work over the injured knee. Proving to be an opportunistic wrestler in a flash, Irwin turned the tables by using his good leg to push Mantell face first into the turnbuckle. That stunned Mantell long enough for Irwin to get the 3 count. Bill was 1-0 on big cards in Dallas. With a new television production in place for World Class, the territory's popularity was growing through the summer of 1982, and Irwin found a prominent place on TV, taking the World Class Television Championship by defeating the Spoiler on June 14th. That title was only defended on the television show out of Fort Worth. Irwin traded that title back and forth with Brian Diaz through the summer, but the H&H Limited feud with the Von Erichs was still front and center for the stable. Irwin and new stablemate King Kong Bundy defeated Kerry and Kevin Von Erich for the American Tag Team Championship on September 10, 1982 at the Sportatorium, briefly making Bill a triple champion as he still held both the Texas and television championships. That wouldn't last long, as Irwin dropped the TV title to former stablemate Bugsy McGraw just 3 days later, and lost the Texas Championship to David Von Erich in San Antonio on September 19th. It's tough to pinpoint an exact time frame, but it was sometime in 1982, possibly during his matches against Al Madrill over the Texas Heavyweight Championship, that one of the longest-lasting fan taunts in World Class began. According to one fan, and a few others that agree with his recollection, it was tag team partner Frank Dusek that let it slip during an interview that Bill's real name was actually Chauncey. This upset Irwin, and the fans certainly took note of that. Fans, particularly at the Sportatorium, would chant Chauncey at every Irwin match, sending the rough and tough Irwin into a rage. It was one of the more humorous, long-running gags in Texas wrestling, even following Irwin to the independents in the 1990s. As for 1982, Irwin and Bundy held the American Tag Team Championship until November 26th, when they dropped the belts to a new tag team in the territory, the Fabulous Freebirds, Michael Hayes and Terry Gordy. That turned out to be a key turning point in World Class, as a faithful date in the territory's history was on the horizon. The 1982 Christmas Star Wars card at Reunion Arena in Dallas included Irwin challenging David Von Erich for the Texas Heavyweight Championship in front of an impressive crowd of 18,000 people. Von Erich would win the match and retain the title, however Irwin's match against David would be almost forgotten in the years to come, along with most other matches on the card. Christmas night 1982 was the night of the famous steel cage door incident during Kerry Von Erich's match against champion Ric Flair for the NWA World Championship. Freebird Terry Gordy slammed the cage door on Kerry's head, igniting the Von Erichs vs. Freebirds feud that made the already hot World Class the hottest territory in the country. Bill would certainly benefit from that surge in popularity, but he also saw that things were starting to change. The Von Erichs and Freebirds were now the primary focus in World Class. There was a lot of out with the old and in with the new happening in Dallas, with a flood of new names coming to the territory. Irwin could either get lost in the shuffle, or step away for a while and come back with a new plan. Irwin chose the latter. A month-long run in nearby Mid-South wrestling led into a month-long tour of Japan, this time seeing Bill come away with a few victories and tagging with the likes of Dick Slater, Roddy Piper, and his old friend Bruiser Brody. In July 1983, Irwin headed to Georgia Championship Wrestling, where he began a notable feud with Tommy Rich. Rich had been having a long, bloody feud with Buzz Sawyer, which would culminate with the Last Battle of Atlanta in October 1983. Leading up to that, both Rich and Sawyer would become embroiled in side feuds, so the tension wouldn't be burned out through the summer. Injecting Irwin into a feud with Tommy Rich was simple enough. In a televised segment on World Championship Wrestling, Irwin joined announcer Gordon Solie at the podium and called out Tommy Rich, saying he wanted to see Mr. Wonderful, this wildfire Tommy Rich. Solie had to cut to commercial, but when the show returned, fans saw Irwin still standing there, waiting and starting to lose his patience. Tommy Rich did come out, but went directly to the ring, where he called Irwin to face him. With little hesitation, Irwin hit the ring and quickly got the upper hand on Rich. Eventually, Rich turned the tables and took control, catching Irwin in an abdominal stretch. Suddenly, Buzz Sawyer hit the ring and attacked Rich, leading to Sawyer and Irwin double-teaming the babyface. Scott Casey finally came to Rich's aid and helped chase the heels away. While Rich and Sawyer would still face each other through the summer, much of Rich's focus was on Irwin, while Sawyer tangled with Roddy Piper and Pez Wadley. The Irwin vs. Rich feud started simply enough with singles matches at the Omni and at shows in Augusta and in Columbus, but shifted the center largely on the bullwhip Irwin carried. A bullwhip on a pole match at the Omni on August 14, 1983 got a great reaction from the crowd and is fondly remembered by many fans today. A handcuff match and a no disqualification tag team match between Irwin and King Kong Bundy against Rich and Roddy Piper kept fans screaming into September, with the feud even drifting over into the CWA briefly. When that feud had served its purpose and was over, so was Irwin's time in Georgia. Irwin was ready to head back to Dallas, but with something a little different. Once again teaming with his brother Scott, Bill again donned a mask to form the Super Destroyers, who came into World Class in November 1983 as part of Skandar Akbar's Devastation Incorporated. The Super Ds added to the unusual title lineage of the American Tag Team Championship by taking the belts in a Phantom match against Bulldog Brower and Roddy Piper, and came into the territory as champions. Brower and Piper, who were likely not even in the same room at the same time, much less part of a tag team, had taken the championship and a Phantom tournament. Despite that unusual stretch of time for the American Tag Championship, the Super Ds would start a period where the title took on a new importance and wasted little time entering a feud with Iceman King Parsons. At the Thanksgiving Day Star Wars card at Reunion Arena on November 24, 1983, the Super Destroyers defended the American Tag belts against Iceman and Junkyard Dog. As always, the Super Ds had manager Skandar Akbar in their corner. The match started slowly with a good bit of humor, showing the Super Ds were not beyond being the ones to slip on the banana peel from time to time. As the match progressed, the Super Destroyers became more aggressive, also showing they were not a comedy act. As Iceman and Dog began to take control of the match, the Super Ds sent Iceman outside the ring where they slammed him into the corner post, busting his head open. The Super Ds worked over the injured Iceman, concentrating on his lacerated head, until Parsons was able to make the tag JYD. World Class officials took a bleeding Iceman to the back, leaving Junkyard Dog in a 2-on-1 situation. With the advantage, the Super Ds pummeled JYD until Parsons returned to the ring with a bandaged head to even things out again. For whatever reason, referee Bronco Lubitsch called for the bell, ending the match in a double disqualification as Skandar Akbar climbed to the ring apron. Parsons pulled Akbar into the ring, but the Super D with the yellow mask, which was Bill Irwin, grabbed Iceman as Akbar produced a fireball to burn Parsons' face. The Super Ds left with the belts, but also with the ire of Iceman right behind them. Iceman vowed revenge, and with the help of tag team partner Brian Adias, took the American Tag Team Championship from the Super Ds at the 1983 Christmas Star Wars card. The feud between Akbar's men and Parsons would continue into the spring, with the Super Destroyers regaining the tag title from Parsons and Adias on January 30th, 1984, as Adias was on his way out of the territory. Devastation Incorporated would add to their list of enemies as a heel versus heel feud began between the stable and the Fabulous Freebirds as well, giving more opportunities for high-profile matches for Irwin. Irwin's career was arguably at its highest point going into the spring and summer of 1984, but not before a horrible personal experience in February. Despite the fact that he had always been a heel, from his first appearance in Dallas, Bill had a good relationship with Kevin, David, and Kerry Von Erich, as they were all around the same age. Because of kayfabe, Irwin was not able to spend a great deal of time with the Von Erichs outside the ring, but in Japan, there was a totally different dynamic. All of the American wrestlers, heel or face, were expected to stay together. In February 1984, Bill went on tour in Japan along with Scott Irwin as the Super Destroyers. Also part of that tour from World Class were old friend Bruiser Brody and David Von Erich. The Irwins, David, Brody, and other wrestlers arrived in Japan and were immediately part of a media scrum. Once that was over, they were taken to their hotel and were free to do whatever they wanted for the rest of the day. A bus would be there to pick them up at 10 the next morning. The group went to Ribera Steakhouse, a popular place in Tokyo among pro wrestlers to this day, thanks to their American style of preparing food. Everyone got a steak, with Bill taking note David actually ordered another steak when they were done. Back at the hotel, Bill went to David's room and the two just talked as friends, having the freedom to do so they didn't have while in the States. Finally, Irwin left to go to his room and get some sleep. Sitting on the edge of the bed, David said he was going to call his wife. That's where Bill said David was when he left the room. The next day, the bus arrived on time, and the wrestlers were all on board, except for David. All Japan Pro Wrestling official Joe Higuchi came onto the bus, calling Bruiser Brody to go with him. The other wrestlers laughed, joking that Brody had to go take care of the promoter's son, saying David must have had a few too many drinks the night before. Then they heard sirens in the distance. Fearing this was more serious than they imagined, Bill and Scott left the bus right behind Brody and went to David's room. He was still on the edge of the bed, right where Bill had left him the night before, but had laid back across the bed. Irwin would later describe him as being a dark blue in color. He was dead. The reality of being a pro wrestler at the time, Bill was barely able to begin processing what happened when he was on his way to prepare for his first match, a loss to Jumbo Tsuruta in a televised event. Bill, Scott, and Bruiser were unable to attend David's funeral in the U.S., though they were at a memorial arranged by All Japan Pro Wrestling in Tokyo. The Irwins and Brody stayed for the duration of the tour, with Bill even getting the chance to tag with Brody in a victory over Giant Baba and Takashi Ishikawa. On February 26th, Bill and Scott, as the Super Destroyers, challenged for the All Asia Tag Team Championship, but came away without the belts. Rivera Steakhouse gave Bill some photos that had been taken the night he was there with David and the others. When Bill came back to Dallas, he gave those photos to Fritz, the last ever to be taken of David. Returning to action and the feud against Iceman King Parsons in World Class, the Super Destroyers dropped the American Tag Team Championship to Parsons and Buck Zumhoff at what was now known as the David Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions at Texas Stadium on May 6, 1984. Super D's got that championship back just 15 days later, but lost something that changed the rest of their time in Dallas. To get a rematch for the tag titles, the Super Destroyers agreed to unmask if they lost a match for the tag titles at Will Rogers Memorial Coliseum in Fort Worth. Parsons and Zumhoff readily agreed to defend the title with that stipulation. Zumhoff and Parsons controlled the match early, tagging in and out quickly as they frustrated the Super Ds and manager Skandar Akbar, who stood at ringside. About 8 minutes into the match, the tide turned when Parsons decided to try and unmask one of the Super Ds, leaving him open to a shot from the other Super D coming in to stop it. The Super Ds pounded on Parsons until he finally made the hot tag to Zumhoff, who came in and handled both Destroyers until he tried to run number 1 into the ropes and was met with the foot of number 2. Iceman came in to even things out and hit number 2 with his butt finishing maneuver. While referee Bronco Lubitsch was getting Parsons out of the ring, number 2 came in and rolled number 1 out of the ring, taking his place. That allowed number 2 to pin Zumhoff to gain the victory, but it wasn't over. When a groggy Super D number 1 came back into the ring to celebrate, Parsons and Zumhoff immediately went for his mask. It made all the more awkward as it was obvious Scott was actually trying to get the mask to come off instead of preventing them from taking it off. The mask was removed, revealing it to be Scott Irwin underneath. Seconds later, Super D number 2's mask was removed, revealing it to be Wild Bill Irwin, with announcer Mark Lawrence proclaiming,
It's Chelsea!
Now unmasked, Irwin switched from an extension of Scott's Super Destroyer gimmick to a variation of Bill's cowboy gimmick with the added flavor of motorcycles as the Long Riders. Scott Hog Irwin and Wild Bill Irwin traded the American tag belts back and forth with Parsons and Zumhoff through the summer, but by October the Irwins were ready to move on. On October 22, 1984, Bill and Scott lost the American Tag Team Championship to the Fantastics, Tommy Rogers and Bobby Fulton, and left World Class. After a brief stop in Memphis, the Long Riders headed to Championship Wrestling from Georgia, the new NWA territory created after the WWF took over World Championship Wrestling. In their first few matches in the territory on November 18th, Scott and Bill won a tournament to crown National Tag Team Champions. In a relatively short but active 6-week run, Bill's feud with Tommy Rich was reignited as Rich tagged with partners as varied as Brad Armstrong, Ron Ritchie, and even Abdullah the Butcher, trying to get the belts away from Bill and Scott. The Irwins held off Rich's attempts, but did eventually drop the belts to Ole Anderson and Thunderbolt Patterson in January, before Bill moved on again. Bill and Scott temporarily went their own ways through the first half of 1985, with Scott staying in Georgia through March, before moving on to Mid-Atlantic. Meanwhile, Bill returned to Championship Wrestling from Florida, where he became embroiled in a notable feud with Dutch Mantell, attacking Mantell backstage in Orlando and leaving him a bloody mess. That led to a confrontation on television that ended with Gordon solely delivering the infamous words from the time, "We're out of time, see you next week." The Mantell feud culminated with a steel cage match in Orlando, which Mantell won. Bill then moved on to a program against Hector Guerrero over the Florida Heavyweight Championship, spending most of his last month in Florida almost exclusively wrestling Guerrero. After several title matches, 2 non-title Mexican death matches, and a Bikers Rules match, all won by Guerrero, Irwin was on the move again as he reunited with Scott and the American Wrestling Association. Returning to the Long Riders gimmick, Scott and Bill immediately entered into a feud with Road Warriors over the AWA World Tag Team Championship. That shifted into a feud with Scott Hall and Curt Hennig when Hall and Hennig won that title. Despite never taking the tag titles, the Long Riders had a healthy run in the AWA, lasting through the rest of 1985 and into 1986. Unfortunately, it was also a time of another personal tragedy. In March of 1986, Scott and Bill began splitting time between the AWA and the Montreal, Quebec-based International Wrestling, winning the Canadian International Tag Team Championship on March 6th. It was during that first short trip into Canada that Scott thought he had a pinched nerve. After several tests, it turned out to be something much more serious. Scott had brain cancer, and not just a single tumor. It was inoperable, and doctors gave him 1.5 years to live. Scott continued to wrestle into 1986, though he would have an increasingly lighter schedule as the year progressed. By May, both Scott and Bill were working exclusively in Montreal, and Bill doing most of the in-ring work during matches. The Long Riders dropped the International Tag Team Championship to Dan Crawford and Tom Zink on August 12th. On August 8, 1986, in Montreal, Bill and Scott tagged together for the last time in a 6-man match with Steve Strong, as they lost to the Road Warriors and Tom Zink. On December 6, 1986, Scott made one last appearance as the Super Destroyer for Jim Crockett Promotions, returning to the territory where it all started, and the gimmick that first gave him success. He lost to Ricky Lee Jones in Cleveland, Ohio, and quietly went into retirement. On September 5, 1987, Scott passed away. For the first time, Bill was truly on his own. As Scott stepped away from the ring, Bill traveled to the Universal Wrestling Federation, where he and Leroy Brown took the UWF Tag Team Championship from John Tatum and Jack Victory in November 1986. By 1987, the money simply wasn't there for the UWF, and owner Bill Watt sold the organization to Jim Crockett Promotions in April. Bill decided to head back to Dallas, this time to the outlaw promotion Wild West Wrestling, where he appeared as a babyface, tagging with the likes of the Fabulous Lance, who was the former Lance Von Erich. That led to one more run in World Class when Wild West owner Ken Mantell became part owner of the World Class Wrestling Association, with Kevin and Kerry Von Erich merging the two promotions. Bill feuded with Black Bart and Jimmy Jack Funk through 1988, facing Bart at the last Parade of Champions card at Texas Stadium, and tagging with Blackjack Mulligan to defeat Bart and Funk at the final Cotton Bowl extravaganza in October. As the merger between WCWA and the Memphis-based CWA came closer to a reality in 1989, Irwin decided to leave World Class for the last time and went to World Championship Wrestling. Spending most of his time in the lower mid-card, Irwin did have one shot at Sting in the NWA World Television Championship, but lost to the Stinger in about 3.5 minutes. Most of his time was spent jobbing to Dick Murdoch and Scott Hall in house shows, but he did briefly reignite things with Tommy Rich during the Great American Bash Tour in August 1989. Irwin did have a memorable series of matches in WCW, but most people don't know it was Bill. In September and October 1990, NWA World Champion Sting had a series of matches against a mysterious opponent called the Black Scorpion. While several people wore the mask over time, and in the end Ric Flair was infamously exposed as being the Black Scorpion, it was actually Bill Irwin that was under the mask most of the time, and appeared as Black Scorpion during the series of house shows. Of course, Sting successfully defended the title in all of them. The industry was changing, and it was felt hardest by wrestlers like Bill Irwin. the mid-carders that were not long before the glue that held professional wrestling together. WCW and the WWF were the two big companies, though a few smaller ones were still hanging on into the mid-1990s. Irwin went back to Dallas again, this time to the Global Wrestling Federation, where he worked through most of the existence of that company. Irwin and Black Bart briefly held the GWF North American Tag Team Championship before feuding with each other. Irwin held the GWF Brass Knuckles Championship through most of 1992, surrendering it when he lost a Loser Leaves Town match to Johnny Mantell in June 1992. Irwin would later return as the Super Destroyer, taking with Mantell to defeat Kerry Von Erich and Bobby Duncombe Jr. in a double chain match. Irwin even briefly revived the Super Destroyers, with Gary Young stepping in as Super D number 2. By 1993, Irwin had moved over to the smaller independent Big D Pro Wrestling, though he did job on a couple of WCW cards. It was obvious if he were going to stay in pro wrestling, he was going to have to make it in one of the bigger promotions. With that in mind, he began contacting the World Wrestling Federation, asking for a chance. It was Bruce Pritchard that finally got back to Irwin, asking, "What can you do for us?" Knowing WWF head Vince McMahon likely wouldn't be interested in Wild Bill Irwin, Bill pitched an idea. "You've had a prisoner," he told Pritchard. "You've had a race car driver. You've had a garbage man. You've had a baseball player. But you've never had a hockey player. A guy whose job has always been to fight. Now he wants to fight in the WWF. We could call him the Goon." The WWF liked the idea, at least enough to give it a try. On June 25, 1996, the Goon made his WWF debut on an episode of WWF Superstars in La Crosse, Wisconsin. The Goon won the match over Dan Jesser by countout. Fan reaction to the Goon was somewhat mixed, though most of them seemed to like the dropping of the gloves as soon as the bell rung. It quickly became clear to Irwin that the Goon was going to be used as a glorified jobber, and sometimes not that glorified. Goon's only 2 appearances on Raw were losing to Mark Miro and Funk Flash. After losses to Jake Roberts in WWF house shows in Louisiana in March 1997, the Goon was gone. But not before a memorable moment for Irwin. Before one card, Irwin went to the ring right after it was set up to loosen up and hit the ropes. A large young rookie was in the ring doing the same and asked Irwin a question. "Can you body slam me?" The young wrestler told him nobody in his training class could slam him. Irwin asked, "Can you jump onto my shoulder?" The young wrestler said he could, so Irwin said, "Then I can slam you." After giving the rookie some instructions, Irwin then body slammed him in the middle of the ring. That young wrestler, who had never been body slammed before, was Mark Henry. Gone from the WWF, Irwin spent the next few years in the independents, including the short-lived World Class 2 in 1997, where fans would still antagonize Bill by calling him Chauncey. Irwin did make 2 appearances in the WWF as Bill Irwin in 1998 on Shotgun Saturday night shows in Texas, and a month-long run in Japan in early 1999, and appeared at a couple of ECW house shows in 2000. Otherwise, it was small independent promotions like Midwest Pro Wrestling and World All-Star Wrestling. Irwin did have 2 more notable appearances in the WWF as the Goon when he took part in the Gimmick Battle Royal during WrestleMania in 2001, then again at the Raw 15th Anniversary show in 2007. Bill Irwin's last recorded match would actually be as the Goon on March 10, 2014 in Ironwood, Michigan as part of WrestleSlam for UPW Pro Wrestling. The Goon defeated Peter B. Beautiful at the Pat O'Donnell Civic Center. In retirement, Bill and his family returned to Minnesota, where Bill operated a wrestling school in Duluth. He still lives there today. Wild Bill Irwin is the perfect example of the lost art of pro wrestling. He was a mid-carder that never quite became a main event star, but was part of the oil that kept the wheel moving in the territory days. Irwin was valid as a champion, but could also take the loss to someone they were trying to push without losing credibility. He learned from the best at a time wrestlers could change direction in the ring instead of blindly following the script regardless of fan reaction. Irwin might not have been at the top of the card, but he was someone fans looked at as a star. Maybe most importantly for world-class fans, he is another wrestler whose story doesn't end in tears. While he saw his share of heartache, he came out of the business healthy, and is still living a good life to this day. Bill Irwin is remembered as one of the notable names in world-class history, even if most of the fans called him Chauncey.
Utsunomiya! I'm Super Destroyer! This is Wild Bill Irwin!
Tell him.
We're here for one reason! That's because the Aussies are gonna get in the ring with Wild Bill and the Super Destroyer! And they're gonna go down!
That's
Isn't
right.
that right?
The Aussies, that's right, they're from down under. They call themselves, have a good day. They're gonna have a good day as they go down under the 1, 2, 3 of the Super D and Wild Bill. Have a nice day.